Hello YouTube. Today I want to talk about the concept of a zombie MLM. I'm not sure if I made this term up or if I heard it somewhere else, but I'm hoping to define what this is and explain why I think iGenius in particular is going to become a zombie within the next few years. That is, from 2025, which is now, until probably about 2028. One of the other reasons why I'm doing this talk is that I'm noticing that in the anti-MLM space, there are predictions of the demise of MLMs all over the place. For example, Monate, Modern Nature, which has been doing the dwindles right, but refuses to die. In fact, what Monate will probably do, like many MLMs, is either go affiliate, and I don't think iGenius is going to go affiliate. Monate will go affiliate, or will end up being a zombie, and I hope to explain. Now, what happens to an MLM when it refuses to die is that it doesn't collapse, or it doesn't get the rug pulled out from under it, as happened when Modere was sold by its owner. Closed down by its owner. Rather, it is the result of the slow drip of subscribers and revenue just drifting away. So whereas meetings are still held, it looks alive, but really it's not growing, and the leaders quietly slip out the back door. And that is what has happened to iBoomerang, and I'm going to use iBoomerang as an example in some other slides. I want to talk about the 8-year trajectory of iGenius, which was Wealth Generators 8 years ago, acquired in a reverse merger a company called InvestView. It was not an acquisition by InvestView, it was a reversed merger. The owners at the time of Wealth Generators basically bought the rights to call themselves InvestView and gave some money and stock to the previous owners of InvestView. Within 2 years, Wealth Generators changed its name to Kuvera, and 3 years after that, that is at the beginning of 2021, changed its name to iGenius. I'm going to talk about 3 possible futures for iGenius: complete collapse, sudden and precipitous, a true turnaround, and finally a zombie walk into oblivion, which I believe is the base case and what that means for investors and distributors. When the predecessor of iGenius was created in 2017, it was called Wealth Generators, not because it actually generated wealth like these mining servers in the picture. It was a Forex binary options education MLM, and it very quickly earned a CFTC warning, or action, I should say, and which they settled for, I believe, $175,000. And that brand became a liability, so they rebranded to Kuvera Global. That is the Hindu god Kuvera, the god of wealth, who is also, but Kuvera in Sanskrit apparently also means small, pudgy, and ugly. It was not much of a pivot. There was a bit more emphasis on trading tools and crypto, but the core business remained largely the same despite the new name. And then in the beginning of 2021, they changed the comp plan. Brian McMullen came on board, and this was not a completely new company. Chad Garner's protestations to the contrary notwithstanding, the more things change, the more they remain the same. What they did do was launch a poop coin called Endow. They swapped for more aggressive crypto and trading narratives. They were really driving along the post-pandemic cryptomania boom, that wave, I should say. And they opened a subsidiary called SafeTech, which was basically Bitcoin mining, and they fixed some equipment, but they stopped fixing the equipment, and they still own contracts in Bitcoin miners in the country, Iceland. I want to talk a little bit about the shadow of regulation that's been chasing them. They were subpoenaed by the SEC on a couple occasions. One related to a complete Ponzi scheme scam called Apex. I've discussed that at length in another video. They've been flagged and named by several regulators in the United States and abroad in other countries, most notably and recently Poland and Canada. A settlement was reached in early 2025 with the SEC over Apex, after which iGenius paid the slap on the wrist fine of $375,000. The pattern that has emerged is that there is recurring friction with regulators. Well, they had a spike in 2021, 2022, and they've done a fade since then. What happened in 2021, it's really unclear why there was such a spike, although the arrival of WFAB and perhaps some other groups, OBG, AMG, I'm not really sure who joined when, occurred in 2021. But since then, revenue and subscriptions have been drifting downward, not compounding. And there really isn't any evidence of a sustainable growth engine driving the iGenius train, as it were. The shape of the curve really matters more than the precise numbers. It is downward. So again, I want to review those three futures. If there is a big and decisive and devastating regulatory action, iGenius could do an IOVIA, which used to be IM Mastery Academy, and simply fold. Or, and this is extremely unlikely, they could have a turnaround. But a turnaround, as I'm going to explain, is going to require some serious reform and products that people actually want to buy. What's more likely, and I'm going to discuss it in a little more detail, is the zombie decay, which is refusing to die and just wandering aimlessly looking for brains. An instant collapse might follow a major law enforcement action from the SEC or the FTC, or if there is a sudden liquidity crisis. I'm not sure how that would play out, but it would be a cause. Their history has shown that they are able to settle and dust themselves off and stagger on. I don't think that's likely. I think the slow leak, as I'm going to explain, is more likely. A complete turnaround, what is that going to look like? It's going to entail iGenius coming up with a product that people would buy even if it were not attached to a comp plan. Now, Anthony Napolitano and others is going to claim that 93% of the customers are just happy customers, but I am dubious about that assertion. I believe that they are heavily pushed and incentivized to recruit, and that 93% isn't that they don't want to, they simply are unable to. What else is iGenius going to have to do? They're going to have to simplify their compensation plan, and it's going to have to be compliant with the requirements of the SEC. They're going to have to publish metrics. We're going to have to know what is a real retail sale versus a distributor sale. We're going to have to know what their churn rate is and what their earnings distribution is. As of today, they do not do that. And leadership culture is going to have to shift away from hype recruiting, which is almost certainly what they do now, and flexing incomes, which is what virtually all of the distributors do on social media. Turnaround is extremely unlikely because it's going to require giving up the kind of approach that they've been using for the last 8 years. It's going to need several years of boredom and absence of drama and discipline, which I can't see Chad Garner, Christian Crabtree at all doing. Because there is a culture of constant new opportunity, and I believe that Brian McMullen is often the engine behind that, and unless Brian goes away, I can't see that changing. And the history of their own rebrand suggests that these are just cosmetic changes and not reforms that are meaningful. This is what's most likely to happen. There's going to be a gradual subscriber bleed with no sharp cliff event. And this is, in fact, is what has been happening for the last 7 quarters. We are now in the 4th quarter of 2025. Their events will get smaller. In fact, they have already been getting smaller and less frequent. They're going to have one North American meeting per year and one European per year, rather than the usual 4 that MLMs that are active and pumping out revenue do. Their leaders are going to have to, you're going to find them pivoting to coaching, as Afnan Khalifa did. They're going to do masterminds and side offers and not pushing the MLM so much. Now, Miguel V's Raposo was doing some of this before he finally jumped ship to B Club. He had a thing called 15-minute crypto, and he abandoned that when he got to B. He's making some money. And then when B does the dwindles, I suspect that Miguel is going to try to sell his own crypto education as if he knows anything. I want to point out also at this point that this is precisely what iBoomerang has been doing since all of their diamonds departed last year. They have done a couple things. First, they paused payouts and claimed, perhaps they were telling the truth, but they claimed anyway, that their payment processor went down and they had to switch to another one. And then most recently, that is in November of 2025, they changed their compensation plan. And those are 2 other signs of doing the zombie walk. If you are currently a distributor of iGenius, you should be aware of the shrinking pool of warm markets and interested prospects. And it is almost dried up, virtually dried up in the United States, and is now in the process of drying up in the Middle East. The leaders are finding it harder to hit and maintain ranks. There is going to be a dependence on selling coaching, and we haven't really seen it yet. I mean, we've seen it among people who actually leave iGenius, but we're going to see more leaders leaving and selling coaching. There was another smaller team that I'd been following for a long time out of Toronto, and they have already departed and are selling coaching services. The risk of paying to stay in a story that is winding down is going to become too high for most folks. So the most likely outcome is that there's is going to be a slow zombie-like decay with a small risk of collapse and an extremely low risk of a genuine, ethical, I should stress, turnaround. So where do we go from here? If you are involved in iGenius, ask yourself, does this still make sense if there were no hype? Does the opportunity still make sense in the absence of hype? And please learn to recognize the pattern of a zombie MLM before you waste any of your time and money, because the time that you spend is valuable, and so are your skills, knowledge, and experience. Way too valuable to waste in iGenius or any MLM. That's all I got. I'll see you in the next one.